happening in the Middle East now and what's gone on, it's a combination of internal pressure is the driving force. So in 1988 and 2007, you saw that's the driving force to create international change. But what the international community, how they react to that driving force is really important. And that doesn't happen overnight, And so a lot of what U.S. Campaign for Burma does is one, it spreads awareness, and two, it helps to put events like this on and talk to the media, talk to people in D.C., and keep it on people's radar screen. And then when something does happen, and a pivotal moment does happen, you have the infrastructure in place to make sure that the international community is doing the right thing. And so I think it's critical if you look at democratic changes, the three components I think of are one, the army, two, the internal opposition, and three, the reaction of the international community. And so what U.S. Campaign for Burma does is try to steer the role of the international community to make sure that they do the right thing. And Maureen can speak a little bit about the broader movement surrounding Burma, since that's her expertise.
Well, I think it's really important to, one, keep informed about Burma. And, you can't, it's not covered every day in the newspapers. But if you, I have to do a little plug for our daily news listserv called BurmaNet, and our editor, Philip House, is right up there, thank you. And Heather also substitutes when Philip is not able to do it. But it's a daily free listserv that comes into your, I'm sure a lot of you already get it. But it does help to tell you the story that you won't see even when the New York Times covers it. They'll cover some big thing that happened. But what you won't know unless you follow it closely, and this is a very painless way, is the junta is they're broke, but they're also very rich. They're making about $1 billion a year coming from that natural gas sales that they're basically is wholesale plunder of the country. And so it's a very rich country, but the people are not seeing it at all. So you'll get to see the dynamics of when some change comes, and maybe some more progressive military people will decide, look, we don't want to go to be tried for war crimes with the senior generals that have made these decisions. And that's the kind of pressure that we also want. We want to reach the military to say, we're not going to go down with him. So I think it's really important. I'm very glad to hear that Myo Myint said he wants to, or somebody said he should be talking to the military like this, but he should also follow it up. He should keep up. He should have a daily, like a talk show to the military. I mean, he really should, because they're starving.
We're really keen.
Yeah.
Is that an ICC thing that actually threatens them, or what
The
is their
ICC
thing?
does threaten them, even they haven't signed. They're not part of he didn't sign the Rome Statute. But they are vulnerable because we happen to know, long stories I won't tell you, but we happen to know that the #1 senior general, he's not much in the limelight. You won't hear much about him, but he actually is scared of the tribunal. He's not quite sure what it is, but every time he reads about Pinochet, and then he reads about so-and-so, and then Milosevic and whatnot, and he asked about it to an Asian head of state once in a private conversation. He said, hey, what happened to your dictator? This is a country that's now democratic. Say, what happened to your dictator? Is he dead, Of course he was not dead. He was just, well, he's dead now, but of old age. But at that time he wasn't dead. He was just retired, and they had a democratic transition. So the thing is, it's really up in his mind.
But I think the question is, what is the threat to the regime from, like, a perspective of what Americans can do, or what,
Yeah, so there's two things that U.S. Campaign for Burma is working on in conjunction with our global partners. And one is to push for a UN Commission of Inquiry, which is the first step to an ICC indictment. And so we have support of 16 countries around the globe now, including the Obama administration. Last August, they came on board on paper in support of it, but they've never actually put their full weight behind this measure. And so the 4 ways you can get a Commission of Inquiry, one of them is through the Human Rights Council, and the Human Rights Council is having the upcoming session. And so what we're asking for is U.S. leadership, because if you don't have U.S. leadership on this, it's not going to happen. And you've seen recently in Libya, within a week, there was a Commission of Inquiry. In Guinea, there was a Commission of Inquiry. In Kenya, there's been a Commission of Inquiry. And in this story, you see Myo Myint, this has been going for 60 years. And 2 months ago, the violence, when they broke a lot of ceasefires with a number of the ceasefire groups, and the war escalated again, and it doesn't make the papers. And it continues, and because it's not new and it's not sexy, nothing happens. And so until we have U.S. leadership, that's not going to change. And so that's what we're trying to do, and that's our main campaign right now. And then the one other thing I would add is, as Maureen said, the regime makes all their money from oil. They just oil, gas, teakwood, jade, and they just wholesale it and sell it off. And then they put it in foreign bank accounts. And so there are sanctions that were authorized by Congress a few years ago and that were recently implemented in Libya and Egypt to stop third country banks from taking their money. And what you can do is the U.S. Treasury can go in and say, you either freeze the account of these Burmese regime members and their cronies, or you lose access to the U.S. financial system. And again, that takes U.S. leadership that right now we don't have. So those are two things that the U.S. Campaign for Burma is pushing hard for right now.
I just want to open up to questions, because I know that there are several people who both were actually in prison with Myo Myint at different points, and also other people who may have general questions for Myo Myint.
Yeah.
There are microphones that you can speak into.
Yeah, Myo Myint, do you want to introduce your colleagues and friends who are here?
Yeah, the British monk, Venerable Zotika, he and I spent together the same prison at one time. He is one of the leader of the 2007 book. There are some of my friends and Myo Myint, yeah. He and I spent together the same prison for many years, and now we met again in Visa.
So as an Irish, ignorant person about Burma, did you like the film? She asked him. And if the answer is no, don't answer. But freely.
Yeah, and another one, Kupukwa. Where is Kupukwa?
She was here. Somewhere.
Go to the restaurant.
So,
how do they feel the film represents?
here and as Patrick said. So now I have something to tell you. I want you to know about the Burma issue. So one is the case of COI. So right now we want the United States government to let the establishment of the COI. So this is one of my main concerns, and another is political prisoner issue. So now we are trying to, now we are making the one campaign to free political prisoner. So when I met Mr. Joseph Young, Deputy Secretary of the State, I told him, free political prisoner immediately and unconditionally. Inside our country, the military regimes practice torture as their state policy. So they always exploited from the political prisoners. Even they are free political prisoners, they force to political prisoners to sign up an agreement, never participate in politics. So other thing, as a refugees. So I ask you as a former political prisoner. Now I'd like to ask you another thing, as a former refugees. So now there are 9 refugee camps along the Thai Burma border. 150,000 Burmese people refugee in those places. They face a lot of problems and difficulty being in refugee camps. So I want you to help them as best as you can. Yeah. Yeah, if you have any questions about the Burma Soldier and about my feeling on that.
Well, just a general question. I think you mentioned about, you got it, the footage is from soldier or something. I'm just curious, how did you get those, sacred footage stuff?
Burmese people all over the world ran around for us at our every request. It was unbelievable. I mean, that's the truth. There's the passion, behind the cause is so deep. and so unknown about the West, in the West, is shocking. I mean, we had people going from Chiang Mai down to Bangkok and running around in DVDs, and I mean, it's unbelievable, and then Ricky and Annie having to invent new ways of transporting lots of footage, cyberly across the world, because we had no budget really for such a film. I mean, it was remarkable.
We were also lucky in that some of the, there were two journalists who were in Burma in 1988 when the uprisings happened. They were covering spot news, and they were selling it to BBC, AP, a bunch of other places. And one guy, Philippe Ducot, had shot a lot of the material from 1988, and so we ended up using his footage. And he was great because he was laughing. I mean, this is just a typical rights question if anyone's filmmaker. When we wrote to him, because he was the underlying copyright holder, we discovered when we started researching, we found it through the BBC, and he said, well, let the BBC know that I've never received any licensing payments from them, and I keep saving my footage everywhere. So, but he was fabulous, and he actually shot a lot of the 1988 uprising. He was there with the camera.
And there's some people, Kurt Hansen, for example. I mean, we have no idea who this guy is, but he was on the front line in Burma. We have no idea. I mean, and he, please use my footage. I mean, the goodwill. I mean, I call these type of things an international collaboration of goodwill. I don't know what else to call it. It's just, there are good people in the world, and
But
we found a lot of them behind this movie and behind Burma.
But some of the footage came to us on jump drives, tiny little flash drives, because it was caught with a cell phone camera, and it was like an MVI folder, and it was tiny, so it's a whole mix. And then Philippe, for example, he said he'd had a flood in his Thailand home, and so all of his masters were destroyed. So he said, whatever you can find, use it with my good wishes. So it looks easy when you watch it. Trust me.
I have two questions. One is for you. You mentioned that your sister was still in the country, your older sister. Have there been any repercussions against her because of all the movies that you mentioned have been distributed in Burma? And my second question is, why do you think, is towards them, just why do you think there's been so much apathy from the U.S. government towards this problem?
I'll just make a few comments. The U.S. government is just very distracted. As you see, they've got a very full menu.
60 years, right?
That's true. But it is, it's national interest. When you think about national interest, there's this one giant, American oil company that was grandfathered in so that it can still work there. But other than that, the real interest now, though, and why I think the Obama administration's wanting to revise or review the Burma policy is because they're worried about the influence of China. So that's put a very interesting little aspect to this dynamic there, because China's all spooked about that. So which is great, because China is the big patron of the regime. So if we can sort of manipulate them all, it's going to be a very interesting year coming up.
Yeah, that's what my answer. So, though I want to tell you about some of my siblings who is in Burma, but I don't want to tell you very detailing for their sake. After coming out the Burma Soldier, so their safety is very dangerous for them. So sometimes I want to talk with them by phone. I don't dare to call their home phone. So I make appointment and then you say something where we can use the phone and talk on phone. So some information, though I have the very detailed and very reliable, but here I don't want to talk. I don't want to answer your questions for their safety.
Any other questions?
You guys touched on this a little bit, and I mean, I'm guessing the most likely scenario of regime change is there's a revolt, and then the military basically turns on the existing government. And I'm just kind of curious, especially after seeing what happened in Egypt and things like that, kind of the military's, I guess, sensibility towards the population and the likelihood of a situation like that occurring.
The question is whether the military is, like troubled by what's happening in the Middle East? I mean, the regime? Is it like going to make them change also because of?
Not necessarily tied to the Middle East, but more is the military in a situation like that potentially likely to turn against the government.
Not this military. There's not this military. They what they do is when there have been like demonstrations and all, they bring troops who are, and then there's reportedly they're drugged, they're given all sorts of amphetamines and whatnot, and then they're told that these are the enemies of the people. These are communists. They hate us. They're and they're also, a lot of them are very illiterate and they're not educated. So they are willing to shoot. They're willing to shoot their own people. And this military, there's one thing about them. It's been a very stable dictatorship in a way. I mean, they've lasted that long. They do it out of fear, the country's there out of fear, but then also the military hangs together. But I think because the economy is so bad, and when they see like Myo Myint's story, it's going to resonate because most of the soldiers are not the ones creaming off and plundering the country and being rich. If you saw the footage in the Burma BJ about the Safri monks, there's the shot of when the Japanese photographer is being killed, and the soldier there is wearing flip-flops. They basically don't pay them. They can't afford to pay them. I mean, they can afford to, but they're not using it. So they're very ill-equipped. They're using very bad, very inferior weapons from China. So they're not happy people at all. So the defection rate has gone up about 10% in the last year. And the people who they've been forced to rape and kill and plunder too, and those people are starting to defect and then tell their story. So maybe that could be a whole series. Not only TV talk show.
Yeah. So in 1980, at the age of 17, I joined the Burma Army. Every new and young soldier. So before we were sent to the military training school, we are forced to sign up the military service contracts. I was forced to sign up the 10-year service contracts. So after making that agreement, and then we were sent to the military training school, there we were brainwashed by the then one-party ruling party called BSPP, Burma Socialist Programming Party. That party had taught us to hate and against a democratic society, to regard them, these democratic society, are enemies of country, people, and Burma Army, to hate and to against ethnic armed groups. They are destroyer of our country. They are enemies. So most of the Burma soldiers, lower rank, they are uneducated and illiterate. They never heard about politics. What is politics? They think whatever they did whatever they do in front line is right thing. But right now, after 1988 pro-democracy uprising, some of the soldiers, they know more and more about the international affair. And then in Burma Army, every military officer corrupted. So the living standard between the other ranks of military officer, the gaps are bigger and bigger and bigger. So now, in 2 or 3 months ago, I heard about the information about the Burma soldier defecting to the other side. Some are deserting from the army. So in long in future, I don't know when, but in future I believe these soldiers in lower rank, I mean, they will stand for people that we can change political system of Burma.